City of Stevens Point Historic Preservation Design Review Commission meeting, recorded December 6, 2023.
Pass down.
I have one.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right, it's 5 o'clock. I call to order Historic Design Review Commission for December 6, 2023. Roll call.
Siebert.
Here.
Monk.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Calnan is excused. McFarland.
Here.
Malewski.
Here.
And Cutler said she was going to be a couple minutes late, so but she'll be coming on Zoom.
Okay, the minutes for the previous meetings aren't yet done, so that's not on the agenda. We're going to have discussion, possible action on number 2, discussion on the Historic Preservation Design Review Commission Design Guidelines, section 3.23, exterior metal walls, section 3.3, foundations, 3.4, windows and doors, 3.5, roofs. So, Adam, you want to?
Yeah, so we have 4 different sections that on the agenda, and I'll preface by saying that I don't have much to say in total amongst the 4, so I don't foresee it to take, I guess, too long in terms of a conversation, but there are a few topics that I wanted to touch on related to these 4 sections. So first, for the metal guidelines, honestly, I don't have much guidelines that actually stands out as sort of problemsome. Just for context, the metal guidelines would be located on the very bottom of page 3, going through about the first half of page 4 of the packet. So I just wanted to first bring this to context. If there's any comments or questions you have specific to these sets of guidelines, I'll say that there are some topics here such as paint, such as certain character defining features that we'll be touching on in a little bit later today and then in the following meeting. So that's part of the reason why I kind of pushed off those specific talking points. But if there's anything, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we can get moving along to talk about foundations.
Can I just ask about metal?
Yeah.
So say it's in terrible shape. It really can't be repaired. So is there any option for replacement?
Are you talking about like more so siding or roofing material?
Not roofing. Something,
roofing?
some metal detailing on the front of a building, you know, that might come around the top of a cornice or something.
Yeah, I think the initial question that I would want answered in a situation like that is that feature character defining or not.
Okay.
If it's not, I think naturally there's a little bit of a degree of flexibility. If it is character defining, then I think based off of how the guidelines are currently written, it's pretty cut and dry in terms of what folks can do.
Yeah.
I think character defining is that specific feature character defining to the building and to the broader district is going to be the key question.
So if it is contributing, you're saying that they have to replace it in metal?
Preferably repair and not repair existing and not replace, but if it would have to be replaced, then yes, the same material.
Match the original in design, color, detail, and material.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, that would be, which section is that?
Number 3.
Number 3. Yep.
Any further comments, questions?
Otherwise, we'll venture over to foundations.
Okay.
And this is something that really it's going to apply more so to Clark Street Historic District, more residential properties than anything. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about as it relates to foundations is guideline number 5 relating to ventilation. This is something that is one of the more trickier types of improvements when additional ventilation is required. So say, I'll give you an example on the Whiting Place, that salon that was recently started about I don't know how long ago that was now, off of this, within a suite, a first floor suite off of Strong's Ave. Basically, by introducing a new use within that proposed area, there were additional fresh air requirements from a building code standpoint. In order for that to happen, you had to have basically an additional vent added onto the exterior of the building to transfer fresh air from the outside in. That posed a tricky situation given that how our current guidelines relate to ventilation, and then I'll talk about it a little bit for foundations, is that any new vent openings can't be visible from a public right of way, from a street, from a sidewalk. And the tricky part is, in a situation like that, it's completely 100% visible. How do you address a situation like that? And this is a similar situation that I've seen for more of our residential homes, is that, say somebody wants to add a bedroom in a basement. And there's building codes pertaining to ventilation like that as well. So how our current guidelines say, this is against guideline number 5, saying that if you want to create new openings for vents or other types of mechanical installations, there she is, it has to be on non-character defining, and then in a way too, there's another section where it talks about essentially the same thing, that is preferably not visible from a public right of way. I guess my question to you all is, are you comfortable with how it's written right now? Are you okay under certain conditions to allow for, say, a new vent to be installed, provided that along the front elevation of a building, provided, say, there's some screening or some sort of I guess screening provided, so that it kind of shields that view from the public right of way? I guess where are you, because this is this issue that like I said, I've come across a number of times now, that sometimes you're able to address it between myself and the applicant. Sometimes it can get tricky to solve. So I guess, what's the feel amongst the commission as to new ventilation, new vent openings, keep it the same how we currently structure it in terms of requirements, or are you looking at potential changes?
Sometimes it can't be avoided. For example, if you're converting a basement room into a bedroom and you have to have an egress window, you
Yeah.
can't put an egress window on a non-facing surface, because it has to be on the wall that the bedroom has. You can't move it to the back side. So sometimes it's impossible to avoid. I think to the greatest extent possible, but I think the question then is whether those exceptions have to come to this body, or whether administratively those can be approved.
Yeah, and just a little bit of context, since I pulled together that information this morning, amongst the homes within the Clark Street district, about 2/3 have a full basement. The other third roughly has like a partial basement. So I mean, there's not, as far as I can see, say like a crawl space within a house where it would be pretty infeasible for something like that to happen, adding a new bedroom in a basement. So just a little bit of context. But Peter?
Yeah, I was just about to mirror Mark. I think that provided, there's something there to kind of negate or lessen that impact. I think that should be something to account for, seeing that some of these places are built for the time and not updated codes.
Yeah.
And that it would be, I think it would also be good to make certain things less strenuous or hard for the homeowner, and that sort of thing, or business or whatever.
I think there's something as far as homes on Clark Street. There's such a thing as screening that you could easily do, which, as opposed to downtown, you know, on the front of a building. I guess the question is, how big is the vent? You know?
Yeah.
How big is it? Does it fit, you know, I mean, is there an inconspicuous place? Is it below the windows? Or is it a window that they need a ton of ventilation? I would imagine it wouldn't be, because the spaces aren't that big that they would need that kind of ventilation. But what is it? What
Yeah.
is the size?
If
I
it's
guess the size is the question.
If it's a case of, say, an egress window for a bedroom, you're talking,
Right.
I mean, I'd be lying to you if I know the exact square footage, but it's a
It's big.
considerable size.
Right,
It's
right.
big.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it's more a vent for providing fresh air, then maybe a foot by six. It's nothing
Right,
big.
right.
Or you even need vents sometimes if you're adding a high-efficiency water heater or, you know,
Yeah.
furnace, and you need fresh air. I mean, those vents are small, but they're still vents, and typically are exhausting through the foundation.
Right. Or just above it, yeah.
Okay, any other
Yeah.
comments?
I guess that I wouldn't have a problem with somebody putting a vent in and, you know, per some kind of camouflage, because obviously you could have some camouflage in that you could still get the air that you need. And certainly in the residential neighborhood, you know, it would be, because there's space between the houses or whatever, you could easily do some landscaping to remediate that. But usually it's just a deep window, isn't it? It's just a deep window well.
Typically.
Yeah.
Typically.
So, and I have those. You don't see them. I need a ladder to get out my deep window wells. That's why I'll flood first.
And is it, I guess, just to piggyback off that, Carol, is the general consensus amongst the group that if something like that is incorporated, that screening would be required?
If it's from the front, I think
If it's
that-
visible from a public right of way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And I think staff would have, I don't think that would have to come to here. I think the staff could approve, that could be worked out between staff and
Right.
the property owner.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
The next section.
Windows and doors.
And for these, I'm going to kind of couple windows, doors, roofs, kind of all under the same conglomerate. So one of the topics that I've been talking with a few folks now downtown especially is that there's an interest in incorporating some sustainability initiatives within these design guidelines. So some of the pages in the packet are taken straight from, I believe, the National Park Service addressing more sustainability topics. I apologize, some of the pages, for whatever reason, kind of got cropped a little bit or duplicated for whatever reason once the documents were combined, but apologize for that. But I guess a couple things that I wanted to address. You know, first and foremost, I think we all have a general understanding about what are some sustainability projects that could be performed under the context of window, door, roof improvements. This would be like energy efficiency windows. These would be, say, a solar panels on the top of the building, a green roof, something that, with the exception of the energy efficient windows, we don't necessarily have examples of at this time. But I guess first and foremost, the context of sustainability. When we talk about the flow of this document, is it better, do you think, to create a whole separate section in the design guidelines, say with the title of sustainability, and include specific types of improvements that would kind of fall under that lens? Or do you think it's better to piecemeal certain sustainability projects within their respective improvements? So if you want to put solar panels, that's found under the roof section. If you want to put energy efficient windows, that's under the windows and doors section instead of a separate sustainability section. I've kind of been going back and forth. I can see pluses and minuses, so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are just for formatting, first off.
I kind of like the interspersed, and just maybe do like a different color for that, or just like in textbooks, they have like the text, but then they also have like a text box or something about like a connection or something like that. That's what I'm envisioning, something like that, just kind of like in the same section, but like a pop-out.
Defined, yeah.
Sure,
Sort of.
kind of like what we've been talking
Yeah.
last time of having like helpful hints or some sort of separate section within a section.
So incorporate, I don't know, excuse me, there's solar panels in with the roofing section.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I think that's a better way.
Otherwise, you're flipping back and forth
Exactly.
all the time between here's my roof and then here's solar over here.
The only other option I was thinking of, if somebody's interested in sustainability, the only other option would be if you would just make a reference in each section, sustainability improvement may include such things as such and such. Those may be found in the, in the roof section. You could say, for sustainability efforts, you may want to consider such things as, and solar panels, this, that information may be found in this section, and that would be the other thing. So then all the sustainability things for those that are interested in that effort would have them all in one. I think either one would work, and I have no problems with the other one either.
So I guess one of the things that comes up right away, as far as I'm concerned, if I was going to put solar panels on my house, I'm on the right side of the street, because the solar panels would be on the south side of my house, and I'm on the south side of the street. So what happens if people on the north side of the street want solar panels? And most likely, I got to think, you almost have to put them in the far backyard if you're not going to. And fortunately, when I think about it, Clark Street on the north side has all deep lots. They took everybody's property from the south side of Main Street, and they got the deep lots, But what would you do with that? What would you do with somebody who wants solar panels? Because that's going to come up.
Yeah, and that's
gonna be a toughie.
That was going to
Yeah.
be one of the topics that I want to talk about, which perfect segue, Carol. So I think, general rule of thumb in terms of regulations for solar panels is that has to be flush with the roof as possible, not visible from a public right-of-way. For the downtown,
That's not
super
an issue.
easy.
Right.
Right. The issue comes for residential, and I'll say, keep in mind, there's a little bit, we as a commission are a little bit limited in our ability to regulate solar, because there's a whole separate section in state stats basically talking about how regulations are formed with respect to solar and some of the limiting factors associated with that. So I'll preface by saying we got to be careful if we do incorporate solar guidelines. With that said, I think this is a situation, the only way I can see this work is there's a guideline saying it's preferred that solar panels are not visible from a public right-of-way. If somebody wants to basically get a waiver, you go before this commission and discuss it amongst the group. That's really the only way that I can see it, because I think you make a perfectly great point, Carol, is that I think from an aesthetic, solar panels on a roof would be a lot more visually appealing if it's not visible from a street, but
It has to be.
if it has to be, given vegetation on the lot, given the tree line on the property, and the amount of shade that, the amount of sunlight that's provided, rather. That's the only way I can see it, unless the 5 or 6 of you have any other suggestions.
I guess I was kind of interested in the comments in one of these sections that they didn't like the look of the solar roofing. There was someplace in here that they had a picture of a house, and they said that was inappropriate because it was
Okay.
solar roofing. It was on a colonial house,
Yeah.
yeah, somewhere in there.
Remember where-
Yeah. Do you remember seeing that?
It's
They looked like they were
page-
kind of shiny.
24.
Yep, on the right side, second down.
24?
Page 24, yep. Yeah, so historic roofing materials in good condition should be retained rather than replaced with another material perceived as more sustainable, such as, in this case, solar roofing shingles.
I thought that looked a lot better than the panels.
Even though they
Anyway,
made that.
Yeah,
but I mean, they kind of poo-pooed it.
yeah, that's something that I noticed, and that's been something I've been meaning to contact our city attorney about in the context of if somebody would bring a solar request before this commission, and the commission would say, hey, we want you to do solar roofing shingles instead of an actual PV system, is that still in alignment with state stats as far as not being too overburdensome in terms of regulations?
Do you think that caption actually goes to the picture down in the bottom left?
Nope, that was about, yeah, that part cut off, it's on the
What got
very,
cut off?
the very top of page 25. That's talking about
gotcha.
really the color of the metal roof.
Yeah, that's the metal
The
roof, the
cool
light.
white.
Yeah.
Yep,
And not so cool.
not so cool.
But if you're talking about efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's 10 degrees hotter in your attic with a black roof. It's something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. They say it's not, but put on black clothes and go outside on a hot day and see how you feel.
So I guess,
In January, it's kind of nice.
But you've also got these ice things
Me all the time.
Yep.
Yes.
that
yeah. no, I
change
noticed
the
that.
look.
So I guess first and foremost, are you interested in, as a group, with including, say, solar guidelines within the?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So the other thing is,
Yeah.
what if somebody says, I really don't want them on the roof? I want them in my front yard.
Yeah, and that, I mean, there are some restrictions from a zoning code standpoint as far as
Okay.
the placement of it.
Okay. Which means, what are?
So along Clark Street would be setback 25 feet from the
Okay.
front lot line, you know, based off of how close the house is to the,
Right. It
to
might be.
the front lot line.
Is that
I
from
don't
the
know.
sidewalk? Or from the street?
Lot line, because
From
the
the-
sidewalk's not necessarily lot line.
No.
That's created a lot.
General rule of thumb in that area
It's
is
from the street.
1 foot in from the inner edge of the sidewalk would be that front lot
Right.
line.
Usually
Okay.
12 inches in, usually
12 inches in from the sidewalk?
from the sidewalk.
Oh.
Yeah,
So
So they don't do that
that's still.
30 feet, like they do in our neighborhood?
It's because you're zoned.
Hi, guys.
Okay.
This is Hannah. I'm sorry I'm not there, but I just wanted to add a quick comment. I think that, solar is going to, and more of this sustainability is going to just keep coming, more and more. So the more that we can get ahead of that and put that, in, the better. And, the more that we can, educate them on, what is best practice for the Historical Society. Our commission is asked, but I think that the solar, we also have to recognize that that's the best thing for us all, and the best for, our sustainability in general and our city. So I think we need to think about that as we think about, the historical preservation of everything as well.
And to piggyback about the ground mount system, there are some examples where folks have, I wouldn't say screening requirements because that defeats the purpose naturally of a solar panel, but you have some sort of, say like a landscape buffer to add a little bit of aesthetic. So that reasonably could be something added specifically for ground mount systems, but I think by and large for Clark Street, just based off of what our zoning code requires along the side and along the sides of the building, in the back of the building is really going to be the prime area for it.
I would mention too, though, that lot lines can be problematic because there's some parts of town where the original sidewalks were put in 2 feet
I was going to mention
from
that.
the lot line.
Oh, okay, but some sidewalks are narrower than others, so
and-
where is that foot?
When they went in and rebuilt the streets, they're trying to make it now consistently 12 inches from the lot line.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then when they moved the sidewalk, where they had built their garage, their car no longer fit between the garage and the sidewalk. It would
Yeah.
overhang the sidewalk because of where and they always assumed that that was part of their yard.
Oh, yeah.
And
I didn't
2
know it was a
feet.
foot.
They're trying to standardize it at a foot now, so when they rebuild them, they're doing it 12 inches. But some of them were more than that. So what you had assumed was part of your front yard, a couple feet of it, in some places 2-3 feet, or, city right-of-way. It's not consistent, so you do have to know where your lot lines are.
Wow. Who knew?
So I think for the specifically for solar, what I'll do is I'll put something together and kind of kick it back to you as an initial draft as far as guidelines are concerned. I mean, really, I think the main guidelines that I see is relating to the location of it, both for ground mount and for roof mount, and then for the case of ground mount, some sort of screen.
Okay.
And then lastly, for the sustainability, the green roofs. Green roofs.
green.
Interest?
Oh, yeah.
No?
I'm very much interested in green roofs. I think that's something that would be great for the city to do.
And then I think the general comments that I've come across, and I think this is this is reflected well within page 25 of the packet, is saying that if you have any sort of vegetation, plants on the roof, basically make it low line so it's not visible from the sidewalk, from the street. And I think that's something that seems pretty, it seems pretty reasonable, because you don't want to have a situation like the first one on page 24 where you have some sort of shrubbery rising 5, 6, 7+ feet that it's quite visible.
You mean like the trees on the top of the science building at the university?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
So what about a new building?
But what?
A new building that somebody has the penthouse, and certainly if you're in the big cities, they have trees on top, on their terrace, because they're not having low vegetation up there because it's a patio, it's a penthouse, and they're paying for it.
Yeah.
You know, so obviously we don't necessarily have that right now.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can understand that in some ways downtown because it's a commercial area. But I don't know if in a residential neighborhood or an apartment complex kind of thing. But then the second stories of some of the stores downtown are in fact residential. So I'm just kind of,
Yeah, and I think anything like that, say like on a patio, that's kind of where you're getting into that line of the ability to enforce.
Well, and it's not a permanent structure then either.
true.
Yeah.
It's a pot.
It might die.
Yeah.
It's
True.
not planted there. It's
You're
in a
right.
pot and it
It's
can be
got-
moved and
exactly. Right.
yeah, so I see that as being different.
Right. So that wouldn't be included then?
I wouldn't think so.
Correct.
No, okay. Can we go just back to the windows?
Yeah.
On here you have, should be replaced, number 3, if replacement of a door, a window or a door unit is necessary, the new unit should be replaced to match the original in size, scale, material, but you can have aluminum clad over wood windows. I guess my question with that is, I mean, there are fiberglass windows, that, look at him.
No.
There are vinyl windows.
Yeah.
There are a whole bunch of different kinds of windows. What happens when you do some of the windows, and because of the temperatures here, you'll get frost on the inside of a window? And then you have wood on the inside of the window. And obviously, that's an issue, you know, because most interior windows now, most windows, exterior windows, are not made out of redwood or some kind of some kind of wood that doesn't mind if it gets a little wet. They're pine, you know, and pine is something that, is an issue, you know, with exterior, because it's almost an exterior in some sense, you know. I guess, and the other thing that comes along with that is that if I change my windows in my house, right now, the casement is set for a storm window. Well, if I put thermal panes in, I would not need a storm window on that. So the whole configuration of the window by its nature is changed. One of those things in here says they maintain the storm windows.
Yeah,
You know, and do I want to maintain those storm windows? Nope, not on the second story. No?
Why?
yeah. I know, Tim, you had a comment earlier that I think you were going to talk about at the very beginning. But before I get to that, before I pass it all over to you, the one thing I'll talk about from a sustainability standpoint, and this is something that I learned at one of the seminars in La Crosse at the statewide historical conference, was that naturally there's a lot of attention towards windows in terms of really from a sustainability standpoint. But in terms of like heat loss, for example, a big thing, insulation is really the gold standard in terms of what type of improvement can be done to a house to try to address situations like frost building up in the in the inside of a window. So I mean, in a situation like that, personally, I don't know how much impact one type of window versus another would have necessarily. I think there's kind of more larger issues as to why something like that would occur, as insulation being one of them. If you improve more of the thermal, blanking on the second word here, retaining more of the heat within the building, it'll address that in and of itself. So.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
So if you can have aluminum clad, then
Yeah.
why does it have to be wood on the inside?
Well,
Because then you're dictating what I have to have on the inside of my house.
yeah, and I mean for Windows, it's I get where you're coming from, because it's that tricky part of technically that part is considered the inside of a house. You could make an argument that's outside of the purview of the commission, but still, if it's part of the whole window unit, which that's how I would consider it, that's something that would be warranted for the commission to have a say in something like that. Mark?
When you do have wood windows that are aluminum clad, the cladding on the exterior are just the outer edges, it's not the entire window, is it?
It's kind of ratcheted right around the corner,
Right.
right around the edge of it, because those are the convertible
But if
ones
you,
I have on
but
there
what
right
about
now.
like with the mullions and that type of stuff?
Well, it really depends on your house. I only had, just it looked like a double hung window from the outside. I didn't have all those mullions. So, muntins, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think that's the other thing that, it says that, I mean, some storm windows have all those muntins in. I think maybe my brother's house has that, like 16 windows within one.
Yeah.
But I can't see that just a straight window on the outside, because that's what I have. I mean, I have all those small panes, but yet my storm window is just the single across the middle.
Yeah.
So the restrictions here are basically saying I can only have aluminum clad windows as far as as any other kind of material.
Unless effectively you would get a waiver from the commission, correct?
Right. And I think that's always the caveat, in certain situations where something's not feasible, you have to give the ability to approach this body for permission.
Yeah.
Because there are always exceptions where what the guideline prescribes can't be done.
Yeah, it's trying to be a comprehensive guideline, but ultimately, for any piece of regulation, there's going to be one-offs where
There's always-
you have to consider it.
Yeah.
So, okay. Then the last thing I want to talk about as it relates to design guidelines before we venture onto the next item. This is something I promised you all that we would be talking about at some point when we had our walk audit along Clark Street earlier this summer, and that's the whole conversation about metal roofs. I have some personal opinions on the matter. I guess first and foremost, I'll just kind of kick it back to the group. So we had a conversation earlier in the year about, say, how our guidelines currently state is if you have a shingle roof, you want to replace it to, say, a metal roof, that wouldn't be allowed, right? There were conversations that spiraled after that about, say you have shingled roof, but you want to replace it with a metal roof, but you have the design of the metal roof is in a way that it appears to be like shingles. Is that something that would be preferred or favorable in a situation like that, based off the design of the metal roof? So those were some of the conversations that had, and there was an interesting conversation that took place during the audit, but like I said, I want to kind of I want to have that conversation with you all and see kind of where you stand, what are some of your perspectives on it. So whoever
As I think I've mentioned before, you can find metal roofs that look for all the world like they're shingles.
Yeah.
And they're not, the difference in price is, from a standing rib kind of thing, the difference in price is minimal. And it looks real. And of course, it wears like metal wears. So you don't have the kind of, like cedar shakes and that sort of thing. You don't have the warping and all that stuff. So that works, but to have the standing rib thing on a historic house just makes no sense.
Agreed. And just for context, so the right-hand side of the screen here, and that's listed, I'll have to find the exact page where this is in the packet, but this is kind of a summary as it relates to metal roofs. What are some of the drawbacks associated with that type of roofing material? I'll have to look at. So bottom of page 18 through kind of the first half or so of page 19, I think that does a really good job of explaining each of the different types of roofing materials, wood, metal, slate, tile, and talking about really what are some of the problems, what are some of the drawbacks with each of those types of materials. Because naturally, for any type of improvement, it's hard to find a material where there's not going to be some sort of drawback, right? So I think that, just for context, is a really good nugget to look at in the context of metal roofs. But yeah, I think, before I get to me, Carol, Mark, Peter, Eric, Hannah, if there's any comments you have related to metal roofs.
So tell me when those, and I didn't read every word here. I read whatever took me an hour and a half. Tell me when those, what do you call them when they have the strips in them? When were they
Standing
used?
rib.
Standing rib. Yeah. When were they used?
Oh, they come along probably, 40s maybe?
Is that right? They didn't
Metal
have-
roofs have been around since about the Civil War, but the metal was made in, it varied, but like foot square
Okay.
sheets, I don't know, and they are applied like shingles.
Oh, okay.
So one of our buildings in Plover has that, and
Okay.
you'll swear it was shingles.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the school has the standing rib,
Right.
and it's real obvious what that is, but they come along mid-20th century somewhere.
Okay. But yet that house, that Rui's house, you know where Rui's lived? On the corner of Clark Street and Reserve. That house, they just redid their porch. I think that you just approved that. We just approved that. I wasn't here at that meeting.
Oh,
the yellow one?
the
The yellow one?
Yeah,
southeast.
it's a south, it's a northwest corner.
Yeah, okay.
They just, it's right across from
Oh,
Emerson
yeah,
Park.
yeah, yeah.
Had that storm damage.
Obviously, that's had that metal roof on it. It looks like that house always had that kind of roof on it. You know, and certainly my neighbor's house, the roof is so high, you know, that you don't see the roof. So if somebody wanted to put on one of those other types of metal roofs, yeah. What's on the only house that's right across from St. Stephen's Playground? It's the single house on the block of Century Building. They have a metal roof. Isn't there a metal roof on that house? The only house that's on the Century Block on the corner
Oh,
there.
Sanders' house you're talking about?
Sanders, yeah,
Ida.
Sanders.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. We'll have to look at it.
Yeah, that's metal.
Anyway, so if, say again, my neighbor, you know, was going to put a metal roof on, and Tim is saying that, you know, the difference in cost is not that much to put the layered look on it that you couldn't see anyway. Again, it would be something that they could come before the commission and say, you know, you can't see my roof from the ground.
All right, the history of metal roofs, the original one, Thomas Jefferson was a strong proponent, but the standing seam was the 1950s.
1950s?
When you said
Okay.
mid-century,
That was earlier than I thought. Okay.
mid-50s.
Yep, or later, I should say.
Later, yep.
Okay.
Well, the other ones are all asphalt.
Before that, they had the traditional corrugated metal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Well, the one we put on is now 30-some years old, and it looks like it went on yesterday with the squares kind of thing,
Yeah.
shingle on it.
Wow.
So, you know, they're talking about corrosion here. What, an asphalt roof lasts about 30 years, give or take? This has been up there 30 years, and it, nothing.
But a lot of that, too, depends on using the proper fasteners, so you don't get that galvanic reaction, because you have dissimilar metals, and all of a sudden, it
right.
creates, so
Well,
you
that's
have-
true,
you do
yeah,
have to be
yeah.
cautious. They have to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So do they glue it?
No, you just have to have the same type of metal.
Oh,
You
for that.
can't have different metals, because
No,
that.
I know, they
They
don't
can't
like
have
each
iron
other.
and copper.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess other comments specific to metal roofs. If somebody has shingle roof and they want to replace it with metal, say it has a design so the metal roof looks like shingles, are you comfortable with that, or are you more comfortable with what we have currently saying it has to be a like-for-like replacement in terms of material?
No, I think, I've actually looked at that, and that's probably what we would be replacing. That metal roof that looks like shingles
Yeah.
looks identical. I mean, the
does.
difference is imperceptible.
Oh.
And if, to me, nobody's going to be touching it to notice a difference. And if you're just going by appearance, I don't think the difference can even be, because of its increased durability during the majority of its lifetime, it's probably going to look considerably better than the shingle roof would have at that same point in time.
Fair. Peter, Eric?
I agree.
Yeah. So if you can't see the difference for the roof, unless you go up and touch it, then why wouldn't that be the same for windows?
I think for windows,
If they have the same muntins and, you know, they appear to
The
be,
problem with windows is the material,
yeah.
because vinyl will,
well, vinyl is.
Very quickly.
Right, right.
Well, I think you want to have, at least my vantage point is, you want to have some consistency across all windows on a house. And if you start to piecemeal it based on what windows are visible from a public right of way and what are not, I think when we look at the building collectively, at least in my eyes, I have some cause for concern when you start to kind of pick and choose what windows are subject to a greater standard, essentially. I would treat them all kind of uniform as one. So. Okay. Any other comments pertaining to metal roofs, or I guess any last minute comments?
I would, I'd like to just get people's thoughts on one issue. What if 90% of the windows have been replaced, 95% of the windows have been replaced, and there's only 2 wooden windows left? And people wanted to replace those 2 windows, which is my house.
That's why we have people on that
No,
live in the
but
district.
but I'm curious. I mean,
You
so
have issues.
would I have to, because those are the only 2 that don't match all the rest, and when they replaced them with very high quality, but they're not wood. So I have 2 windows. One is a 6-foot by 10-foot bow window, and I guess they had quotes on what it costs to replace it with, but it doesn't look the same as any of the other windows in the house right now.
Yeah.
The other is which, in all honesty, I would never, it's an oval, it's a very custom window, and then that one will probably always remain, and has a nice little oval storm window that's been so that's always going to be there.
Of course, you would never
Yeah.
change that.
No.
No, you maintain that.
No,
Yeah.
but for efficiency, because it's on the north side, I would love, what they've done when they went back and retrofitted it, and they did a nice job. They put thermal pane panels in between each of the separate things, but it's only got a separation of about maybe 1/4 of an inch. So, I mean, they're not overly efficient, and it's such a huge expanse of glass on the north side. I like it because I'm very warm-blooded. My wife, all from about September on, sits on that couch with a huge blanket on her every night watching TV.
You could put some
Yeah.
heavy-duty curtains up.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
We have big, very heavy-duty thermal, and they're pulled right now, I'll guarantee you. But, yeah,
Under an
and it
apple.
helps. It definitely helps.
I mean, under an application of today's guidelines, technically that wouldn't be allowed. You'd have to
Yeah.
go before here,
Yeah.
before this group for a waiver, essentially. But, yeah, I think that's a good example of,
Willing to touch it.
At-
I've had Windows companies come and look, and they said,
yeah.
we don't do that. We can't, because it's a gradual curve,
Yeah.
and they want to do it in, 2-foot
Straight.
sections. And
The glass itself is curved?
No, but if they're 12-inch wide panels,
I see,
so
I see.
it just gradually,
Gotcha.
yes.
Okay.
Maybe you could put another storm on the inside.
But it's curved. What kind of, because I've tried to figure out how to do that too. Because, yeah.
Put sliding glass doors like they did in that industrial building.
There you go.
That was pretty clever, I thought.
Yeah, I did too.
I guess if there's no other comments, at least for design guidelines, you could probably venture over to the
Okay, preserve.
item 4 and 3.
Presentation and discussion on the creation of a citywide historic preservation plan. Components being of a historic preservation plan, project timeline, general themes to guide the public participation process.
Yeah, so I guess before I kind of get to some of these details, as you mentioned, Chair, I just kind of want to provide a quick summary of where things are at today. So as you recall, the last few months now, we've been talking about submitting a certified local government grant application for the purpose of having an outside firm produce a historic preservation plan for the city. That grant application is due the end of this month, the end of this year. And one of the requirements for submitting the grant application is to obtain quotes from qualified consultants and basically to address any potential outliers. As folks may recall, the maximum amount of funds that we could get from that grant is $30,000, and the quotes that I've been receiving generally range around that $45,000 to $55,000 range. One of the natural challenges that comes about, that was kind of turning into my head, is even if we would be fortunate enough to receive the grant, there's going to be a shortfall of funds. And where do you get those funds? Where do you get that remaining funds from? And at least from some conversations internally, and as Alder Christensen, you can speak to as well, the availability of a, say, surplus fund, say from our capital budget, is virtually non-existent, right?
Not this year.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that I've been trying to grapple with. So, talking a little bit with the chair, with the alder, decided to forego submitting the grant application, but knowing the importance of you all as a commission and wanting to see this plan be created, and really the value that it comes from my end, from a staff perspective of having the plan, I've decided to basically change course a little bit and work on producing the plan internally. Because one of the drawbacks in terms of reaching out to some outside firms was that a qualified consultant has to have both a planning and a preservation background. A lot of the folks that you've talked to have one and not the other. So naturally, I think generally speaking, we're in a good position, the commission and IS staff, to work on the plan. It's just a matter of, as we'll talk about in the next few minutes, is kind of setting some initial guidelines in place as to what you all see as major issues happening currently in Point that can help assist myself as we begin the public participatory process in the coming months. So I guess just briefly wanted to spend a minute or two talking about what is a historic preservation plan. Really the skinny of it is it's a long-term planning document that's intended to identify specific policies and procedures to really guide you all as a commission and I as city staff to promote our community's historic resources. Within that historic preservation plan, it's going to identify some key issues, which is really serving as the basis of, if somebody asks you, why are you looking to create this plan? Yeah, I think you can all think of this, that, and the other as reasons why. I think on my end, one of the reasons that I'm interested in having a plan like that is, frankly, there's some blinking red lights that I can see coming down the horizon that we as a commission will have to address at some point, and it's better for us to be proactive instead of reactive. Things such as the need for a new survey, the need for resurveying our historic resources in town within the next probably 10 years. Really the health of some of our historic resources. I won't name any in specific, but I think you all have a general understanding of what those are. Education, as I'll talk about more. So I guess before I kick it back to the group for initial conversations, I want to talk next about really kind of the history of preservation, the creation of these preservation plans locally on a state level. By and large, creating historic preservation plans, at least in my experience, it's a relatively new project that communities have been doing. A lot of the communities that I've seen who have a plan, they've adopted it within the last, say, 5 years or so. So the actual practice of creating a planning document like that is relatively new, but the 3 plans that I've witnessed that's been either referred to me by the state and that I've had a chance to look at further would be City of Racine, City of Madison, City of Des Moines, Iowa, as far as kind of these gold standard plans. I did hyperlink those plans within the document. Obviously, I don't expect y'all to read them, but at some point, skim them, take a look, just to get a general feel about what are some of the components of that plan.
And all within the last 4 years.
Correct. Yep. 2019 for Racine, 2020 for Madison, and a couple months back for City of Des Moines. So one of the things I want to spend some time about is highlighting some key themes that's commonly addressed within preservation plans, but for the sake of our historic preservation plan is really going to be this initial conversation starter when we have these public interactions with stakeholders, with community groups, etc. So some of the common themes that are talked about in preservation plans. So first off would be evaluating our historic resources. Like I mentioned a number of times now, our current the last survey that was done here of our historic resources was done in 2011. General rule of thumb is 25 years or so is the life expectancy of a survey. Once you get to that point, we as a community, any community for that matter, has to consider doing a resurveying our historic resources, and that naturally divulges into another question of what type of survey is best. Is it better to do a reconnaissance survey, an intensive survey, and then identifying key areas that you want to target as part of a potential survey project? Number two, conduct a social and cultural analysis. This is actually something that's identified in our local historic preservation ordinance as being something that we ought to include as part of our preservation plan. And really what this entails is identifying certain cultural groups that have historic value here in Point. So you talk about kind of their origins, their comings to Stevens Point, if there's certain businesses, shops that they ran. So like to give some examples, City of Racine, I believe, focused on their Eastern European population, their Jewish American population. City of Madison focused on their African American population, their Native American population. So that would be something that if that's something that we want to include, we'll want to have a conversation about what those specific groups are that we would like to cover. Third, preserving historic resources that are not under the purview of a community's historic preservation commission, but are those that have certain historic value in a way that they're eligible for listing on the National Register. Basically, in the context for the city here, these would be our proposed historic districts that are not under your commission's purview. This would be Sunset Fork neighborhood, neighborhood along Church Street, just south and east of the courthouse, kind of about the 24 or so properties just north of Belts, kind of those areas that have identified historic value, but right now there's not any sort of guidance relating to them. What are some ways that communities could try to preserve those resources, but may not necessarily fall within a purview of a community's historic preservation commission? Fourth, identifying financial resources and incentives to property owners, and really this is providing a carrot to people. We as a community want to find that balance of, okay, you're providing regulations, you're providing specific guidelines as to how improvements can be done to a historic building, but it's imperative for that same community to provide options for folks to finance those improvements as well. Next slide, outreach education efforts, pretty self-explanatory. Connecting preservation planning with local tourism efforts. This is something that I think City of Madison, their plan does exceptionally well, and I think it's something that frankly makes sense, that there is that natural commonality between tourism efforts and promoting local tourism with more of our historic, say in the case of Point, our historic downtown. So what are some examples that preservation efforts and tourism efforts can coincide with one another? Next item, increased collaboration between a community's preservation commission and other advocacy groups. These would be UWSP, this would be the County Historical Society, if there's specific nonprofits, trying to create a partnership essentially between those organizations. Next, really outline specific priorities that this commission should do and for municipal staff. So if there's specific ordinance amendments that other communities have adopted that would address some specific issues that's resonant within a community. Coordinate preservation planning with zoning and land use growth management policies. This is something I talked about with our plan commission on Monday. And then lastly, sustainability, as we just talked about. So that's a lot there, but essentially my first question that I want to ask you is the list that I just skimmed through, are there any kind of key issues that I'm missing from this list? Or are there certain issues that I have included on here that you think, no, Adam, I don't think we should spend some efforts, we shouldn't prioritize this as part of the participation process?
I just have one comment as far as positive. Some of the cities that are looking at all of this have lost the ring around the downtown, and we haven't. There's housing, the old housing that is right around the downtown is occupied, and is in fairly decent shape. And there's a lot of cities that have a lot of empty lots around their downtown. And I think that we have such an intact downtown, particularly Main Street, and the square, that the city has really, put things together, particularly on the square, that we start from a good place as far as the downtown.
For sure.
The one that actually interests me the most is the last one. And you did speak to it a little bit on the planning commission, and I think in some ways,
Yeah.
in some ways, sometimes I feel like the historical preservation is the redheaded stepchild that nobody even wants to claim. It's sometimes we get viewed as being almost a hampering entity and I really think that combined with one of the educational aspects of it, I think having that enumerated and showing how we can collaborate with those other entities and all the positive things that we can help provide, I see that as being a really potentially positive offshoot of, after effect of creating this type of a plan.
And just for some context, some of the examples that I mentioned on Monday as far as that coordination between preservation and zoning is, some examples being really making sure max height requirements are uniform between the zoning classification of a historic district with the existing heights of those historic structures. So like Clark Street, for example, all those properties are zoned R3, you're allowed a max building height of 35 feet. There's a number of buildings that don't meet or are not even close to that 35 feet. An example like that being from a zoning standpoint, we wouldn't necessarily prohibit a property owner from adding another story onto a building. But from a historic preservation standpoint, that could pose some issues from a look and feel, from an aesthetics, from really the historic configuration of that building. Off-street parking requirements would be another example. Coordination between really long-term planning documents, a comprehensive plan, a targeted area master plan for the downtown with preservation efforts amongst this commission, making sure that there's that internal consistency, essentially.
Okay, you look at the north side, where Grant School used to be, and
Yeah.
those new apartments they put there,
Yeah.
they don't fit at all. They're ugly compared to the other housing in the area. So we have to be very careful about that.
And I think that's outside, obviously, of a historic district, but a good example of, having that degree of
Yeah.
consistency.
Right.
But I would,
It's shocking.
I would also go with what Mark was talking about. We've talked about this before. Education, the outreach, brochures, and
Yeah.
tours.
Yeah.
We've done tours now with the Historical Society, and they always have rather a large number of people. In that event last night at the Whiting, lots of people were in there because they'd never been in the building, and they didn't care necessarily about the party, if you will. It was more to see the building.
Yeah, I think that specifically, it's not like we do nothing, but there's a lot more that we can do.
Yeah. And the, another part of the education effort that I think would be good is for property owners to get the initial, hey, this is like a historic district, and there's our responsibilities, because I've talked, I've said this before, I've talked to people who live in the district, and they, some of them, like, they got that knowledge way too late in the process. And
Sure.
and not only that, but I think that there's some people that will get housing in this, in the district, and the why is preservation. Why is this so important that I have to go in front of a committee to make stuff, to make changes to my house, why is that even important?
Philosophy behind it.
And I think that needs to be there,
Addressed.
and also in that outreach to realtors, to make sure that they are very specifically, telling prospective clients from the very outset that this is a historic preservation. Because it's just, I've just talked to people who've sometimes will get that knowledge too late in the process, and then they just have a completely negative attitude, and I don't blame them for having a negative attitude towards historic preservation, because it's just like something that they've just been ambushed with. And so I think that needs to be something addressed.
Yeah, and that'll be, as far as like realtors will be one stakeholder group that I know is going to be a group that you want to target as far as having those initial conversations. But ultimately, more of the public engagement piece of the planning process here is going to be a really important step in determining really where are we at right now in terms of informing the public, but also, hey, if we as a commission, if we as city staff want to better educate folks of certain projects in a historic district, what is the preferred means of being informed? And I actually just pulled up, because I have this on the side of me, is just basically a survey that City of Salt Lake did, and ask a bunch of questions. One of them is, how well does the city use the following to inform and or educate the public about preservation projects and programs? And it talks about websites, newsletters, tours, exhibits, trainings, plaques, awards. Like some surveys, there's benefits, there's drawbacks of it, but that'll be a really useful tool in engaging and trying to address some of your questions, Peter.
20 years ago, 18 years ago,
Yeah.
people got certificates that HPDR gave out regarding the original name of their house. It was something that they could frame if they wanted to. But we did talk about it, and I had mentioned before that if, even in Madison, what they do is in neighborhoods, they'll have the name on the neighborhood. They will have the Vaughn subdivision. You could have, though I just noticed on an old map from 1877, I'm in a different district subdivision or an addition than is on my abstract, which is pretty interesting. But anyway, you could easily identify a historic district, and obviously, you know, the Clark Street one, you could easily identify that by the city putting up a sign,
Yeah.
a nice sign.
Yeah.
You know, something that says, you know, we're proud of this, and so people looking would, I mean, if you were looking at a house, you would, right off the bat, ask, where does this historic district end? You know?
No, good points.
And it would be good. I mean, I think that, you know, you could conceivably, if you don't have a spot there to put it, you could conceivably put some kind of banner, you know, on posts.
Didn't we discuss at one point in two in
The-
time as well?
The signs.
Yeah.
The signs.
Yep, and that's still work in progress yet.
But we'd also talked about sending birthday cards to houses that turned 100 years old. Or did I hear about that?
I don't remember
We
that.
did that once. We did
Yeah.
that once. Century
Yeah.
House, we called it.
Yeah.
Right.
And people filled out a very brief form, and as a result, they got a plaque. And it was amazing how many people sent things in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got kind of swamped.
But I mean, that's kind of a nice problem to have, and then people are, you know, instead of they're feeling like, well, I'm kind of burdened by this old house, it's kind of like, I'm kind of like, this is pretty cool. I live in a 100-year-old house. I mean, it becomes a plus as opposed to a minus.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments specifically about key issues? If not, I'll jump ahead then to kind of a preliminary project timeline. I'll preface by saying it's fluid, obviously. But essentially, this is going to be a guide for really me to keep me in check, but also you all so you know of what's going to be kind of coming down the pipeline. So today is effectively meant to be this kickoff meeting with this commission, likewise, similar to what we had with the Planning Commission on Monday. In terms of a timeline, I essentially see this broken down into 3 different sections. The first being more so independent work on my part, which would be more so field work and stakeholder meetings, more on that in a little bit. The second phase would be more of that public participation, that public outreach. So you see the different means of public engagement that will take place, because one of the things that I stress is that obviously public engagement, community input is going to be the driver for what is included in the plan and how the plan is ultimately shaped. But in doing so, it's important to provide different means of public engagement, since everybody naturally has their preferences. If somebody has a preference for submitting surveys in lieu of going somewhere in person and providing comments in a room, you have that option. If somebody would rather attend more so like a town hall style format where there's a presentation and a kind of a group of people in a room kind of like this speaking their 2 cents, that's an option as well. If you're more of a visual learner and want to be more interactive, there'll be public workshops as well that you can provide your comments through that modem as well. So that's going to be kind of that second phase, is that those public engagement measures and providing a summary of really comments received during those forums to you all as a commission. The third phase and the last phase is going to be essentially drafting the document, bringing it before you all for edits, having additional public engagement measures to really present the proposed plan and get some feedback from them, and then ultimately seek approval before this body, the Planning Commission, and the Common Council. Before I get to stakeholders, any issues, problems that you see with the timeline? I just want to make sure, as we kind of look ahead through all of 2024, is there anything that jumps out as I'm missing something, or I don't think this is realistic, you should change course?
Well, as you said, it's fluid.
Right.
Yeah.
But I noticed you front-loaded a lot of it, where you have more time available in the earlier part of the year. Most of your field work and a lot of the
Yeah.
things that are going to be time-consuming, you've scheduled appropriately, so I thought that was pretty
I thought about it a little bit.
pretty shrewd, yeah. No.
Yeah, and I gave myself 3 months to produce the document. I can make an argument it's not going to take as long because a lot of the maps, the visuals I can make ahead of time. I could also make an argument it's going to take longer than that since that's in the dead of summer, and I got a lot of other stuff.
Got a lot of
going on.
irons in the fire at
Yeah.
that point in time, yes, I know.
So the schedule's fluid. Peter?
No, never mind.
Okay. Any other comments?
I was just, had a thought when you're looking at the different groups that could be brought in. Do you
Yes.
think, do you see some of the expertise from the Main Street program? WEDC is also something we'll be able to,
Yeah, I know Aaron will be, from WEDC, will be stopping down here. I think it's either January or February.
yeah.
She's
there's
trying
going
to.
We're going to be having a visit by, yeah.
So that's going to be. I know I've been working with Chris about having that collaboration, not only with the plan, but just
And I see that as
preservation
being
planning.
a natural fit, yeah, absolutely. I'm actually Zooming with her tomorrow morning at 8.
Okay. But perfect segue for stakeholders. So what I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks is assembling more of a comprehensive list of stakeholders, individual persons, organizations, groups. And this is going to be a similar process that I'm currently working on with our age-friendly commission, is that whatever this list of stakeholders are, obviously I'm going to be showing up and I'm going to be meeting with all of them. But what I think is really important in terms of getting more visibility of these planning efforts and really to get some more fruitful conversations amongst the stakeholders is that there's some sort of commission representation. So like if one of you, say, is interested in a certain topic or wanting to have a conversation with a specific stakeholder, you tag along with me and we can have that conversation as a group. So like say, Peter, if you're really interested with the social and cultural context, you know, you and I can maybe meet with UWSP or John from the Historical Society, or Mark, you mentioned about from a planning standpoint. There's a number of groups I'm sure we can talk to from a kind of a planning regulatory standpoint.
And we're looking at working on the targeted master plan for downtown, and this
Yep.
should be.
Perfect opportunity.
I think we're getting much better at the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing. I mean, that's something the city, I think, has
Yeah.
been working really hard at. And
And that's one of the reasons why I think that's one of the reasons why I elected to do this in-house, is that we're going through our comprehensive plan efforts. We're going through the target area master plan efforts. It's better to work on creating this plan in unison with those
Yes.
documents. And
Totally agree.
Really efficiency, save time on our part. But yeah, like I said, I'll be working on getting that list of stakeholders together, and I'll send it to you all, and pick a couple people that you're interested in meeting with, and then I can reach out to y'all individually.
Yeah, let me know what photographs you might want too, because we have a ton.
Yeah, I think Historical Society, broadly speaking, is going to be a really, really important stakeholder, especially with the social and cultural context. Assuming Eastern European descendants is going to be a group that we want to target, they're going to be a tremendous resource. So,
Okay.
but unless
I applaud you for being willing to take this on. I
love this
I
stuff.
think you're not. I know, but I think you're nuts. But that's okay.
I'm a good form of nuts.
Yes, yes. Like I said, I applaud your ambition, because there's a lot there. There's a reason why those entities charge $40,000 to $50,000. So.
No, and like I said, I encourage you to look at the three: Madison, Racine, Des Moines. Look at their plans. Again, don't have to read it, just skim it to get a vibe as to really what the full extent of those plans are.
And
So
it
are
is-
they in here?
Hyperlinked.
They're linked,
Oh, hyperlinks, okay.
Yep.
All right.
because they're like,
Yeah,
because
'cause
I
I
just looked at the Des Moines, and it's like, yeah, it's a novella,
Yeah,
pretty much.
right. Well, and it's a big city, you know,
Yeah.
we're a small city.
Okay.
Because I still don't quite understand the dynamics of it, exactly what it is. I understand bringing all these groups together that would have an interest in it, but then what exactly the product is, I'm
Yeah.
not quite understanding.
Yeah, and I have it in, I'll have to,
Education.
There's some good examples that Adam put up there that,
Yep. That would be, I think, real helpful for you.
Right.
yeah, so page 29 of the packet, what I provided there is just a very
Right.
condensed outline of
The
what
outline.
so really existing conditions and talking about kind of the interactions with these stakeholders. That's going to be the precursor. That's going to be the determining factor as to what are some specific goals, objectives, policies that are going to be included in the plan. And those goals, objective policies are really going to be the meat as to what I as staff, you all as a commission will be leveraging in the years ahead once that plan's adopted.
Okay. I guess we are adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.